So I have two sew-alongs today for you, and I'm only going to show you the alternate version, just those little steps. So I'm going to show you how to do this if you have a serger or you want to use a zigzag instead to finish the raw edges, or if you want a clean finish and you still don't have a zigzag or serger, you just don't want to use one, I'm going to show you how to French seam and hem the edge. So depending on which pattern you cut out, I'm going to show you how to sew both today. All right, let's do it. All right, let's go over the materials that we need. You're going to need a bottom that in a clear fabric like this vinyl. It's a 12 gauge matte vinyl. You can cut this in just like a canvas or something like sort of heavy, maybe medium to heavyweight fabric. I prefer it to be medium to heavyweight. That way the bag has some oomph to it and kind of can stand up on its own when there's a few things inside of it. And it will feel a little bit more sturdy if you use something like a light canvas or something. But if you're going to be using the vinyl, you need that. And then you also need a fabric top and a fabric pocket. We need 28.5 to 29 inches of webbing. That's 1 inch wide. And you'll also need some 1 3/8 inch wide bias binding. About 65 inches should be enough to do the whole project. If you want a little extra to practice on, you can do that too. All right, and I'm going to be using a size 16 needle, just some regular standard thread. All right, so the first thing I do is I get everything kind of ready, and then we can assemble the bag all at once. So we're going to prep our pieces, and the first thing we're going to do is finish the edges of this pocket. I'm throwing you right into that binding because I don't want you to be afraid of it. So we're going to start on the wrong side of our fabric, and we're going to put our binding right side to the wrong side down. And nobody's ever going to see this side of your pocket. It's going to be inside the bag. This is why I start on this side so that our binding finishes to the right side, the side that everybody's going to see. All right, so we're going to put our binding face down. We're going to line it up to that edge there, and we're going to sew it to the pocket with a 1/4 inch seam. I like to keep my binding separate. I don't pin things. That way I can curve this around as I go. And I'm going to just cut that off there, and I'm going to do this one and this one. We're going to bind all 3 curved sides. These first 2 are the easy ones. So again, I just keep this loose so that I can keep those edges lined up there. And I'll zoom in for the final side. All right, and then I'd like to do all 3 of these at once, and then I do the final step all at the same time too. So let's push this out of the way, and now we're going to take this binding and we're going to go around this little curved edge here. So now this one is a little trickier. I always hang off a little so I don't have to be precise. And again, I keep this loose so that I can line it up to that raw edge there. And I'm pulling with this one and pulling with this one at the same time. I really like to use the presser foot as sort of a helping hand, like it's holding things for me as well. So now we have a nice little break on that straight edge. Let's move this out of the way. Come to the curve here. And again, I'm pulling this and sort of keeping the binding straight and just lining this up to the binding. Make sure you go all the way around and then trim it off. So now we have our 3 edges started, just like this. Now in production, we wouldn't have ironed this, but if you want to iron this, you can iron this to the right side, just like this, and then fold it under. So I'll go over to the iron and show you how that would look. Okay, well, I have to admit, I don't think I've ever ironed one of these. So I'm just gonna iron this flat. So press the seam allowance towards the binding. And we'll do our best here at the top because of this curve. We don't need to trim anything since we're not asking this curve to fold back on itself. And so now I'm going to fold this along that raw edge there. I'll do one so that you can see how I handle it without ironing it at all. And if you want to iron it again, you can. Personally, I would leave this last edge undone so that you have some flexibility. But nobody's going to see the other side, so you can go ahead and iron it too if you want. just like that. This one will be a little trickier, I imagine, but you can do it. It'll kind of scrunch right here, and that'll be normal. So if you want to iron all three, go ahead, but I'll show you how I do it without. And then here we have the back of this looking like that. All right, so we'll start with our pre-folded one here. Now, if this fold is right past this stitch line that we just sewed, right? If that's just past that, and we put our needle to the right of this stitch line, we're going to land exactly on the binding. It's not that big of a deal though, because nobody's going to see the other side. And this binding, because it's only one layer of fabric, it's a little bit wide for this because there's just not much fabric. If you're using a heavier fabric, this is a pretty lightweight quilting cotton that I'm using here, more like a poplin. It's not going to take up much space here in the binding. If you're using a canvas or something similar like that, it's probably fitting a little better. It's a little bit more lined up like this. So we just want this fold to cover that stitch line, and then we're going to stitch it down. And we'll edge stitch it all along here, just like that. And then I'll show you how I would handle this if I hadn't ironed it. So I will just fold this live, and I take this edge here, and if you want to look at it kind of technically, we want this raw edge to line up with this other raw edge, so then we know we're folding it in half, right? So if this raw edge is lining up to the pocket and we fold it, it should be about the right width there. We want that fold to go just past the seam line, just like we did on the first one we sewed. And again, we're just going to edge stitch it. And because I haven't pre-ironed this, I have this little technique where I just stick my finger underneath the binding and one on top, and I'm just sort of smoothing it. And that just comes from a lot of sewing binding. Now when I get down to here, because this is an exterior curve, it's going to act differently. So I sort of place it, pre-place it like this. I get it all ready, and then I use my fingers to sort of smooth it out. And I just want a nice smooth edge there. So now this one's the trickier one because you have this little tight curve, but it's binding, it's gonna be fine. And when it's in your bag and sitting against the vinyl, no one's gonna see anything. It's gonna be great. So this edge will feel a little bit like the fussiest edge because we have these two tight curves here, but it really isn't too bad. And again, no one's gonna see the back side, so we just need to cover up our stitch line with that fold and then stitch it down. Now, when you have these tight curves, you want to work in small amounts at a time. That way you can kind of respect that curve as you go. So right here, I just want to make sure that this doesn't go like this. So you can make this angle. We are sort of trying to keep this a nice little squared off tab up here to attach to the top of the bag. Sorry, I'm just going to start on the binding. And again, I just position it as I sew. So I'm pulling this a little further, putting that fold just past that stitch line. And now you have a little break. I'll edge stitch that. And then I position this down here, sort of get it ready. You can see this is kind of raised up. That's okay. And now again, we don't want this edge to get collapsed, this little tab. We want it to still remain somewhat squared off. So I sort of pull this to pull it out of there. It still wants to collapse on itself. You see how like it's collapsing, but that's okay. When we attach it to the bag, we're gonna straighten this up like this and get that nice and lined up. All right, so now we're gonna trim off our binding flush with this little straight edge, like that. Well, maybe a little better, like that. And again, over here and down here along the bottom. We want to go straight across the same shape as the bottom of the pocket. Just like that. All right, so now our pocket will be ready to attach to our bag. All right, now we're gonna prep our top, and I'm gonna show you the two different ways to finish the edges. So we need a seam to join our top right sides together, and that's this seam right here. So on this below, this was the one we're going to French seam right here, and we're gonna turn under the hem on this edge. For this one, we'll overlock this edge and we'll also overlock this edge. But we have to do it in two different steps. So we need to first join our top right sides together along this edge. And we can, if you're serging this, you can sew the seam first and then overlock your edges. Whatever you need to do, you're going to sew your seam right here, and then you're going to finish these raw edges. And you have a 3/8 inch seam allowance here. So we're going to overlock this as well. So whatever you need to do right here to finish your seam, you need to do that. And then if you're going to do the French seam, we're going to put this wrong sides together first. And we have about 5/8 of an inch in order to make our French seam. So the first pass I'm going to do is a scant 1/4 inch. Like this. And if you need to trim anything, just to kind of even it up or make sure there's any, all the threads are kind of gone. And now we're going to iron this. So first I'm just going to press this seam one direction. Doesn't matter which way you go. Just press it down nice and firm. Turn it inside out. Put it right sides together. And then we're going to line it up right on that edge there. Get it perfectly stacked. Iron it one more time. And now we're going to sew this again at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now we're going to finish this opening edge right here with some binding. For either method that you're doing this, we're going to bind this the same way. So we're going to put this, I'm going to turn this right side out since I have a flat bed here. And we're going to bind this edge by putting our binding right side to the wrong side, because no one will ever see this side. And again, I hold this and the bottom layer separately so I can line them up as I go. Now when you get down here, your needle's going to pivot right here at that seam. My serger did a kind of a messy stitch right there, got caught. So we're going to put the needle right on the seam. And we're going to pivot, so I'm going to pull this all the way over. The binding gets a little crumpled, so then I straighten it out on this side here. Sort of like a sleeve placket, if you've ever sewn one of those, but not quite as severe as a sleeve placket. And again, we'll just bind the rest of this all the way to the top. And if you want, you can iron this to the right side. I'll iron the other one so we can see what that's like. We're going to pull our binding to the right side, press the seam allowance towards the binding, and turn under the binding edge just past that seam we just sewed. We edge stitch it down. When we get down here, again, we can kind of round that pivot. I kind of just round it out now. Don't pull too hard, otherwise you might get some torquing. Use my awl to sort of push this where I want it. Like this, all right. And so now we have this bound edge. And we're gonna do one last little step here. We're gonna put this right sides together and line up this opening the best you can. It's okay if it's a little bit wonky up here. What we really want is down here at the base. We want to fold this, and we're going to sew straight across like this. We're going to have a little triangle of binding. And this is just going to make it behave better when it's in its final position. So just like that. And as long as you stay to the right of the seam here, you should be good. And I don't sweat it too much. Even if you forget to do it, it's fine. We didn't do this for years, and then we figured it out, and we thought it just worked a lot better. So now it looks like this on the right side. We can trim our binding. And for this one, we're going to overlock or zigzag, whatever you like to finish. We're going to finish this whole raw edge all the way around, and then the top will be ready for the handle. All right, so now we have our edge serged here, and I leave the tails because I'm going to secure these inside when I go to hem this over the webbing. So this top is now ready for the handle. So now let's get this one to the same stage. So we're going to bind this. So again, I like to put this right side out, put my binding face down along this edge here. All right, and now we're going to iron this so that we can enclose it. So the first thing we'll do is we'll press the binding towards the seam allowance. I'm going to turn this inside out, and we can fold this right along the raw edge there of the top and the opening there. It'll get a little fussy at the bottom here. And you probably won't get a nice clean fold right here at the bottom. Now we'll turn it under. Personally, I wouldn't do this step right here. I'd leave it flexible, but if you want to get some of it, you can. I'll leave the bottom here. Let's see if we can get some of it. Binding is very malleable. Remember, we're going to sew across and make that little V so we can sort of hide all of our imperfections at the base there. All right, so that's pretty good. All right, so now let's sew this binding down. And again, we just wanted that fold to enclose that first seam, so we cover it up. We're just trying to make it look clean. Once this stretches out, it already lays a lot nicer. See that? It gets rid of all those little puckers once it kind of straightens out. All right, and again, we're gonna put this right sides together. Just want it lined up down here at the base, really. We don't really care about up here as much. Fold this, and see, here's the seam, right? So that's what we're sort of looking at, lining it up with the seam. We're going to go straight across this little triangle there. I stay completely inside the binding too. I don't go outside the binding. Trim your threads. And then now we have, we can trim our binding up here. Flush with the edge there. And now we have that little V there. All right, so now this one is going to be hemmed. So we can pre-fold this 1/4 inch there with the iron, and then it'll be at the exact same stage as this one. All right, so I put this right side out again, and we're just going to turn this down 1/4 inch. There is about 1.5 inch seam allowance or hem allowance to enclose. There's a 1.5 inch casing allowance. I allow a little bit extra because of the width of the webbing and being able to get your presser foot alongside of it, because we're going to sew the casing with the webbing already inside. All right, so there we go. We're just doing that. We don't need to do our other fold. If you want, you can, and that would be another 1.25 inches. It's got a slight curve, so it's going to feel a little bit like it doesn't want to fold down exactly. So we'll just get it as consistent as we can. And over here, I'm going to look at how these are matching. All right. All right, so here is our pre-folded hem casing. Now we're going to grab our webbing, and for either one, we're going to find the center, folding the top here, just like this. And I'm just going to make a little crease. And we want this crease really in this casing right here. So right here. You can also put a little nip, you know, you could do this before when you're cutting it out as well. All right, so we're going to put our webbing in a circle, and we don't want to twist the circle. We're going to overlap the ends about 1/2 inch. And we're going to place it on that little center mark there inside the casing, and if you've pre-folded it and you want it to be closer to the fold down here rather than the one you're going to hem. And now we're going to put 2 rows of stitching to secure the webbing inside the casing. Make sure you make it very secure. That's why I always put 2 rows. Trim your threads. This kind of gets a little messy back here. But it's going to be on the inside of the bag because we kept it inside the casing, so when it's folded over, on the right side, you won't see it. There we go. All right, and now we want to fold our top. So here's our webbing, right, not twisted. And we want to put our casing over it, just like this, just sliding it in there. You don't have to worry too much about the casing. It's secure, it's in there. It doesn't need to really adjust or anything as you're doing it. All we need to do now is just not catch it when we're sewing. So let's fold this. I'm gonna fold it a little bit more than I ironed it. We've got this turned under and we're gonna edge stitch right on that fold. I don't think I quite got that 1 1/4 right here at the end. So back stitch. So I get to here and I fold it and I'm just gonna hold it. Now you can move that casing in there, but you don't really need to, as long as you're not catching it. And there should be just enough space for your presser foot to go right along the webbing here, and then at least you'll know you're not catching it. But if you're having trouble getting close to your stitching here, like maybe the webbing is pushing you away and you can't stay on this fold edge, you could put 1/2 of your presser foot on the webbing, and that will help as well. So we're gonna hem this all the way around. You see the webbing is just kind of sagging out, but that's okay. We'll just tuck it back in there. And I'm sliding that webbing towards the top fold. All right, now we get here. I like to make sure, I try not to get this little end past the bottom here. So this little piece past here. Get rid of our threads, just like this. And now we have a draw handle top. Looks really good. Okay, so now on this one here, we're gonna do sort of the same thing. We're gonna put our top right side out. I'm gonna find the center. Again, we want it in this casing up here. So just make this crease up here. There's my crease right here. Take our webbing, put it in a circle, overlap it about 1/2 inch, and then I'm gonna line this up next to the overlocking. As long as I have half of my presser foot width there, we're okay. And now we're gonna secure it. This is your draw cord and your handle, so make sure you secure it really nicely. And then get rid of any threads, especially on this side where it's always messy for me. All right, and so I feel like this is the part that seems a little bit confusing right here. So I can see my webbing is sort of twisted, so I just straighten it out like that. See, there it is, it's not twisted anymore. But like I said, it's secure, you don't have to worry about it as long, and you really can't twist it at this point because it's on the bag. It just makes it easier to sew if it's not like you're not trying to sew around a twist. All right, so we're gonna fold this down. I just lay it on top here, right? And then I fold it down like this. And again, I left that serger tail so that I can pull it to the inside and secure it. That's kind of long. We can make it a little shorter. Let's get rid of some of this. Same with this one over here. Let's make it a little shorter. You don't want it to slip out the casing itself, like out the hole where the webbing comes through, right here. So we just want to fold this under. If you want to secure it first, you can secure it right now. I'm always got this production sewing brain on when it comes to some of these products, but we're not production sewing, we're just sewing one right now. We're having a chill time sewing, right? So now we have that secure, and we're folding down about 1.25 inches again, and I line up the binding edges there. Back stitch, we'll get rid of that thread later, and now I fold it here at the halfway point, and I just sort of arrange it. My webbing is twisted right now, so let's untwist it in there. Don't worry, you won't get it twisted if it's already secured to your bag, you can't twist it. You might twist it, but it won't stay that way, in other words. All right, and I can feel my webbing can slide in there, which is great. So I just leave enough room to put my presser foot along the webbing there. So that's how you kind of know you're folding the right amount. It's a little less fussier than folding it under. All right, and then get our next half here. Put our serging there. I didn't secure that first. All right, and I'm gonna slide that in there, fold it down, line up that binding to the end there, trim our threads, all of them. And now we have, again, another draw handle top with just a little loop at the end there. All right, so now we're ready to attach our top to our bag and put our pocket to our bag and make a bag. All right, we have both of our tops done now, so we're gonna continue assembling the bag, and now everything will be the same sewing for either method. All right, so now we have our pocket we need to attach to our bottom. So we're gonna put our vinyl wrong side up. For this one, it's a matte vinyl. There is one side that's slightly shinier, so I always consider that the wrong side. You can do whatever you want. Some vinyls have a right and wrong side, some of them don't. They vary greatly. And this center cutout right here, we're gonna line our pocket up to that, the bottom of the pocket to the center cutout, just kind of in between these two legs here. I know it's really hard to see there. If you're doing a fabric version rather than vinyl, you're gonna do the same sewing steps. But when I sew the vinyl bag together along the bottom edge and on the sides, you're probably gonna have to finish that edge, and I'll try and remind you to do that if you're doing that. So, and if you're doing a fabric version, you might want this pocket on the right side, and in that case, you would lay it on lining it up here at the bottom, and you're gonna edge stitch the sides of your pocket onto the bag and put your pocket on the outside. But if we're gonna do it the traditional way, pocket goes face down, we line it up at the center down here, and I like to tack it down along the center because I don't sew with pins with the vinyl. So we're gonna just center this pocket between these two corners. We're gonna sew like 1/8 of an inch, like really close to the edge. There's only 1/4 inch seams on the rest of the bag. So, and this shouldn't be any trouble to sew vinyl because there's fabric against the presser foot. If you have a lot of trouble with the vinyl sticking to your throat plate, you could put tape on there or get a Teflon plate. But for the most part, it's usually the presser foot that's the problem because the feed dogs are helping to sort of carry it along. All right, so now when I get to the end here, I go all the way to the outer edge here of the binding, and then I turn like this. And now I flatten out my pocket like this, flatten it out, and I get these little straight edges lined up to the top. Not perfectly, we're just wanting this centered and nice and flat. We're gonna hold it and we're gonna top stitch the pocket down to the vinyl. Now, here you wanna be really careful because if you fall off your binding, it's really hard to re-sew vinyl because you've perforated it with holes. So if anything, err on the side of a little further in from the edge than being too close on the end. Just sew along that end there. And then when I get up here, I sort of straighten this out. Make sure going straight. And again, I'm gonna pivot right here at the top, and I'm gonna straighten this guy out a little bit. And now I'll stop. You can back stitch if you want. And now I'm gonna do this side here, make this nice and flat. Push this so that the top lines up. You can see mine's poking up a little above the bag. That'll be okay. Just make sure that you catch the vinyl when you sew that top there, that top tab. Now we're gonna pivot and go down again along this edge. And you can see this sort of buckles right here. Try to straighten this out without pulling too hard. You don't wanna pull this so hard that you create a bubble with your vinyl like this, you know, like it's poking out. You want this to be nice and flat. If you have not a lot of throat space here, you can roll up your vinyl like this underneath. And I'm sort of pushing with my fingertips to keep this nice and flat. There we go, just like that. And so on this side, you can see we have our pocket attached. and we can still get inside there. So if you want to add a label, I'm going to add mine right here. I used to always put it on the inside between the vinyl and the pocket in this little area here, but it's a little fiddly to sew, so I thought I'd just do it on the outside of the bag this time. So we'll put it right here. And this is a great opportunity to cover up if you have something weird, you know, just do it with your label. All right, so now we have a flat bag here. So you can see our whole thing here. All right, so now we're going to form our bag. The first thing we're going to do is put this right sides together, and we're going to sew this in. Now don't sew both these ends. We're only going to sew this one first because I'm going to show you a little trick on this one so that we're not turning our bag in a way that can damage the vinyl. Now if you're using a fabric version of your bag, you need to finish this edge after you've sewn it together. So we're going to put this right sides together. We only have 2 seams where our machine is going to come in contact with the vinyl on the upper and the lower. So this is one of them. So if you have a lot of trouble sewing vinyl with your machine, you can get a Teflon foot, or you can put Scotch tape or like a tape on the presser foot. And what I do is I put it on the presser, take the presser foot off, put the tape on there. I really get it on there good, you know, kind of scratch it down. And then I trim away any excess and kind of get rid of all the little excess. You can use a nail file to kind of get rid of any little pieces. And so now you just have tape on your foot. And that will often be enough of a coating to help you sew your vinyl together. So this machine's pretty tolerant of the vinyl. I've had another version of this machine and it wasn't. It's just the foot. It just depends on which foot you get. So I'm gonna sew this together. And, you know, remember that this is going to be an edge that shows through the bag. So if you use dark thread, that's going to show as well. Any threads in the bag are going to start to get stuck in there, so you want to pull those out as well. All right, so now we're going to really carefully turn the bag right side out. And what I like to do is I put my hand in here and I hold onto this seam right here. And then I pull it through. Try and get all the little creases to happen near the pocket, and I smooth them out as soon as possible. That's what we'll do. All right, so now you have your bag right side out. Here we have it. Here we have this angle here, right? We have this bottom lined up. Now we're going to fold this in half like this. Boop. See that? Fold it in half. The reason we're doing this is that we don't have to turn our bag right side out once we sew this seam, because the vinyl is very unforgiving when it comes to creases and things. And so this way we can sort of slide it out from the bottom there. All right, so now we have the last seam. This is the side seam of the bag poking out the top here. Right sides together. This is another seam. If you're sewing yours in fabric, you're going to have to finish the seam afterward. Here's a thread right here. Let's get rid of that. Oh, it's on the underside. That'll be fine. There we go. And now, again, I'm going to grab this seam and pull it out like this real quick. All right. We're getting a bag shape now. So we're going to finish our bottom here. So here's our bottom of the bag. Here's the seam going across, and this is the back of the bag right here. And this is the front of the bag, both these little mouths. So you can do either one, doesn't matter which way you go first. And now we're going to line up this raw edge. Now this may really show how well the bag got cut, because trust me, I definitely get some wonkiness when I cut these out too. So you can see that my vinyl isn't perfectly straight right here, and that's okay. We want to line up both these edges so that everything is there. We don't want to miss any of the vinyl, otherwise we'll have a hole in our bag, right? So we're going to lay our binding on here, and here's the seam, here's the pocket. We're going to do this right side to the bottom of the bag, and we're going to hang our vinyl off about 1 inch. A little more if you like. Keep your raw edges lined up, and we're going to sew this, and I'm going to back stitch right here at this angled corner here. Let's get this a little bit tidier here. There we go. Just try not to let this seam right here go past like this. Try and keep it nice and square. It likes to fold right along the binding edge there, and if it's almost, you know, almost perfectly centered. All right, and then now when I get to the end here, edge or back stitch and leave a tail of binding. So just leave like an inch hanging off the end there. All right. And we're gonna do the same for this side. Try and fold your seam here the same way, and you can fold this seam the other way if your machine would prefer that, offsetting the thickness there. The vinyl is much sturdier than you think, even though I've been scaring you with some of these corners, but you know, you can still let it know who's boss. All right, we're gonna do the same thing. Leave a tail off the front and the back of this seam. So leave an inch hanging off there, 1/4 inch seam, back stitch. You definitely want to back stitch. I offset my seam allowances here from one another. And there we go. You can see I have a little bit of a bump there. So I'm going to trim anything away, and I usually have a little corner right here poking up like that. Trim this. These can be sharp, so you want to definitely trim them. And this one especially is a little bit in need of some trimming. So trim that down. We want this to be the same width the whole way, and we want that seam allowance to fill up the binding, so don't trim it too close. You want to leave about 1/4 inch. So we're going to envelope fold this end here to kind of keep it nice and tidy. So the first thing we're going to do is going to fold this up right here, just kind of continuing this seam. So just fold this raw edge of the binding up, and now we're going to fold this toward the bag. I have a binding seam there, so it's going to be stubborn. Now don't pull too tight. I found if I pull too tight on this, because this isn't a right angle corner, it'll just slide off. So just be a little bit firm, but still loose, so you still get a right angle going off the bag. All right, so that's what it's looking like. And now we're going to fold, so this edge right here lines up to the raw edge of the bag like this. And now you can fold it like normal. So we just fold this long edge right here and fold again. And it looks kind of messy over here, but we're gonna clean this up when we start sewing. So let me do this a little closer here. So here is my raw edge. So we're gonna fold this up, kind of continuing this seam right here. And then we're gonna fold the binding toward the pocket. Get rid of this thread here, like this. You can see I'm sort of placing it where that stitching line was. This is the fold edge. It's going to line up to this raw edge here, like this. So in other words, the corner's folding at the finished width of the binding there, not down here, but up here. And now we're going to fold this raw edge also down to this raw edge of the bag, and then one more time like that. So now I get my awl. If you see your stitches there, don't worry about it. This is the bottom of your bag. You really won't look at this ever again. All right, and then I try and slide that just a little bit over to, if I can cover it up. It is loose, so it's still an option. All right, I back stitched there. I'm still holding this, getting that little tail under there, like this. All right, and now we can just bind this like normal. So fold this over just past your stitch line. And your machine is in complete contact with fabric right now, so the vinyl is not going to be an issue. All right, now we're going to do the reverse over here. So first thing, we continue the fold right here along the seam, right here, right? Now we fold away from us, but not too tight, just perpendicular to the bag like this. I'm sort of opening the binding up under here so that I can line up these edges. Now we're going to fold this fold edge towards the raw edge of the bag, not too tight. And now we're going to fold this, continue folding what we've just been sewing twice. Fold, fold, fold. All right, now we get here. I make sure this raw tail gets poked inside, and I pull my fold right over the top. And then when I just need the back stitch right here at the fold. You don't need to go all the way down unless you want to. It will secure it better if you do. All right, so now we trim our threads. And we'll do the same thing on this side. So let's do it one more time. Let's trim this down to like 1 inch hanging off. There's a thing is too much on it with this. All right, continue the fold here of the seam. Fold it towards the bag. And like, see how I loosened it up? I pushed it that way a little bit. It just functions better instead of pulling too tight like this and it just wants to slide off. So we'll pull towards the bag. Fold the corner down to the raw edge. Fold, fold. And now we're going to position. So I open up my bag like this, get that out of the way. All right, and now once I've got a little bit, you don't get much of a break before you have to start fiddling with this one here. Get rid of this thread. All right, so same, continue, fold towards the bag, corner, fold down, fold down. There we go. So now the bottom of your bag is sewn. Next binding step's a lot easier, and your last binding step's a lot easier. You are wrangling the whole bag, but I promise there's none of that fussy folding. All right, so I'm going to trim these tabs flush with my bag. Get rid of any threads here. All right, and now open up your bag. Look at that. Got a little bucket now. All right, so we have our bag bottom and we have our bag top. You want to put your top inside out and we're going to fold it and find the center. We just need to find the halfway point around the perimeter from the seam there. So there we go. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing on the bag. And the way I like to do that is I fold the pocket here, find that center, take that and I put it on the seam of the back here. And now I can fold the bag. As long as I hold this here, I will have a little place here. We can mark both of these, and then this will be our sewing marks for centering our top. I like to put the top sideways like this. It's not sideways to me, but I know for others it may seem like it at first. I like it over here because it keeps the front of your bag facing forward and up, and it doesn't tilt the bag forward or backward if you were to put the handle at the back or the front. But you can put it however you like. So just make sure you have the markings that will work for how you want to position your handle. All right, so we'll put our top in here, and we're going to center that seam. Make sure you fold it the same way it's folded there over one of those marks. And now you might want to get some clips. And we'll put this mark here. There we go, just like that. And your bag should be fitting in there pretty good. If you're feeling like there's a lot of slack in there, you can take it up with the seam here at the end of your top. All right, and now I like to put the binding on at the same time I'm attaching the top to the bag. And the reason is, the vinyl is very unforgiving. You don't want extra holes, right? So we need to make sure that we get this right on the first pass. And I do it all at once. All right, so I want to make sure this seam here stays pushed the same direction as it was sewn down there. So we'll put a clip there. And I think that'll be good enough for us. All right, so the only tricky folding we're doing on this binding is at the beginning. We're going to fold it once, and I folded about 3/4 of an inch, just a little bit. You don't have to start right on the seam. We'll just start back here, just past the seam. Here's the seam right here. We're going to lay our binding there. And we're going to line up the raw edge of the top, the vinyl, and the binding together. So you have 3 layers, except right at the fold you'll have 4. And we're gonna stitch this down. You don't need to back stitch yet. If you need, just need to get that under the needle and let the machine help you now. And I'm gonna be a little rough with my bag. It'll be fine, it'll survive. All right, and so now we're just gonna keep these 3 edges lined up together. only the vinyl, the only part of your machine the vinyl will come in contact with right now is your throat plate. So it should go pretty smoothly. Go all the way around, and I just do a little bit, readjust. Make sure you have all 3 layers because it is hard to see that vinyl sometimes. Make sure your notches are lining up so that you're not in for any surprises later on. Remember, you are the boss of this bag, so just let it know. And you should be well away from this opening here, but it's nice to double check as you're sewing it. Make sure that you're only feeling the 3 layers that you set out with, nothing else. All right, so now we're here at the beginning, and here's our original fold. So we're gonna take the binding and we're gonna line it up to the edge there. And when we get to that folded back raw edge right there, that's where we'll start sewing. And we'll trim our binding to match where the folded edge was, just like that. All right. Now we're gonna make sure we don't need to trim anything. Like I can see this right here. Trim that. Especially like near my label here, I need to make sure nothing's poking up there. It's not too thick. Any threads that might give you a problem there. So just make sure that it's the same width all the way around. We want this seam allowance to fill the binding so it looks really good. All right, and now this is probably a little fussier because we can't really turn our bag. If you have a free arm, you're happy right now. We can't turn our bag inside out now. All right, so now we're going to make sure our top stays in there, pull the binding to this outer edge here, and I'm really gonna mash my bag like that. At least we can see with the vinyl what's happening here. So you can start just past your fold here and kind of get sewing before you get to that fold area. All right, so we got the machine helping us now and holding it, and I'm just gonna straighten out my bag, push that top in there, and I'm gonna fold this piece first. Look at these little threads. Let's get rid of some of them just because we don't want them sneaking out and making our binding look bad. So we're gonna fold this one first, and then we'll fold this one that has the fold in it. I just kind of, you know, force it in there and then I straighten it out with the awl. So now we're going to stitch it down. So now this is, the reason we do this so that this is our last edge is so that this is the side facing out to people. The inside is the top, it's gonna be against the top so it won't be as visible. So you just want this fold line to go just past your stitching line, just like we've been doing. This is our last seam, you're almost done. Just make sure that top doesn't sneak out. If it's pushed down into your bag, it's probably gonna be fine. Just rearrange your bag, mash, mash, mash. Just make sure that you're the boss of it. You see I really mash it down here. All right, we're almost done. Trim this thread here. There we go. When we would finish production with a lot of these, we'd have a whole bin of these mashed little crumpled bags. All right, so the first thing I do is I start straightening it out. We don't want it to stay like that for long. All right, and then we can pull our top out like this. Give it its first little fold there. So when you want to pack it flat, it looks really cute. I really like this binding with this fabric. There we go, and then your bag is ready to use. Just like that. You can see that's the side that was underneath the throat plate. That actually looks really good. And then this is the side we just sewed. And then now we have our draw handle, double, the clear bottom, and there's your pocket. You can see inside there. Well, it was really nice sewing with you. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time.